So, fun fact, I come with a warning label. I have the word wall from Skyrim for Fury tattooed on my leg, and it says, "Oblivion hath no fury like a shield maiden scorned." It's obviously a take on "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned," and I've often wondered, what was the original inspiration for that quote? I'm not saying it was her, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was Olga of Kiev, Queen of the Rus and Christian saint.
There was a prophecy foretold before the time of man.
So before we get started, we really have to talk about the history of the Rus before Olga. And for that, I want to thank our friend Vlad, or Vladimir of the Rus. He's a fellow reenactor, and he comes to a lot of our events. And he is our expert on the Rus. In the 9th century, many Eastern Scandinavians, mostly Swedes, traveled to the east, as opposed to their Western counterparts that went to England. And eventually, these Eastern Scandinavians settled into what is modern-day Ukraine, Western Russia, and Belarus. They sailed up the many river systems and into the area, and when they arrived, the lands were already settled by decentralized Slavic societies who were hostile to the newcomers, as one would be when your lands are being invaded. So the Scandinavians did what they could do during the period and raided the settlements, taking slaves and exacting tribute, and they sailed down the rivers into the Black Sea to the trading settlements. The Slavs called these Scandinavians Rus, roughly translated as men who row, and the Rus began to dominate the waterways, and as such their presence brought order and stabilized the region. This leads us to Rurik, Prince of Novgorod, and I apologize, I'm going to slaughter every pronunciation in this video, so just bear with me. He was the first truly centralized leader of the Rus. He ruled from roughly 862 to 879 from the capital city he founded at Novgorod. Rurik stabilized the realm by setting up laws, establishing a tributary system, because what kind of government would it be without taxes, and uniting all the northern Slavic tribes under his rule. At the time of Rurik's death, his son and heir, Igor, was too young to rule, and so the kingdom was entrusted to his kinsman, Oleg. Oleg began to rule until Igor came of age. During this time, Oleg further expanded the kingdom and united more Slavic tribes under his rule. He also established the new capital in the city of Kiev. Oleg died in 912, and Igor took over as the Prince of Kiev in his own right. And again, thank you to Vlad for the research on the history of the Rus. And I will put all of his socials and links to all of his pages in the description below. Not much is known about Olga's early life. She was born between 890 and 925. I know, it's a big range. According to the primary chronicle, she was of Varangian or Viking origin from the city of Pletskov. The primary chronicle is where much of the information about Olga comes from. It's an East Slavic history of the Kievan Rus compiled somewhere around 1113, and it covers the years 850 to roughly 1110. Olga was no more than 15 when she married Igor, the son and heir of the leader of the Kievan Rus, Rurik. At the time, the kingdom was a loose federation covering territory in modern-day Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. Upon Rurik's death in 879, he left his kingdom to his son Igor. He was still too young to rule, but when he came of age in 912, he took over ruling in his own right. In 943, Olga gave birth to a son, Sviatoslav. The Drevlians were one of the tribes that were part of the Kievan Rus Empire. During the rules of Igor's predecessors, the Drevlians paid tribute to the Kievan Rus. But when Igor took over, ruling in his own right, they stopped sending payments. In 945, Igor traveled to the capital of the Drevlians, Iskorstan, to collect the tribute in person. The army of the Rus was much larger than the Drevlians, so they agreed to pay him. While riding home, Igor decided that he didn't really get quite enough tribute, so he turned around to go back to Iskorstan and demand more money. he took a few of his best men on horseback and left the rest of his army to continue on to Kiev. Upon arriving back in Iskorsden, the Drevlians captured Igor by taking 2 birch trees and bending them over to touch the ground. They then tied the top of each tree to Igor's feet and let the trees go, tearing him in half. After Igor's death, Olga became the regent for their 2-year-old son, Sviatoslav. As the leader of the Rus, Olga became a highly sought-after marriage prospect for most of the rulers at the time. The leader of the Drevlians was Prince Mal. He sent an envoy to Kiev to report to Olga that they had killed her husband and to propose marriage. Yes, between her and Mal. Yes, kids, he sent messengers to be like, hey, yeah, sorry about the whole murdering your husband thing, but you're single now. Wanna hook up? Olga decided to play along with this, and she told the 20 messengers, your proposal is pleasing to me. Indeed, my husband cannot rise again from the grave, but I desire to honor you tomorrow in the presence of my people. Return now to your boat and remain there with an aspect of arrogance. I shall send for you on the morrow, and you shall say, we will not ride on horses, no gore on foot. Carry us in our boat, and you shall be carried in your boat. So the next day, when the Drevlians did as they were instructed, the people of Kiev carried them in their boat to the palace. They didn't find this strange at all, thinking that this was some kind of an honor to be carried in like they were on a palanquin. So when they arrived, they were promptly tossed into a pit that Olga had dug the night before, boat and all, and they were buried alive. While they were being buried, Olga stood next to the pit and bent down to inquire whether they found the honor to their taste. But Olga wasn't done yet. After burying the Drevlian messengers, Olga sent a message to Mal to inform him that she would just love to marry him. Her messenger told Mal to send their most distinguished men to her in Kiev so that she might go to their prince with due honor. So with the promise of marriage, Mal sent the best men who governed the land of Drevlia to escort Olga to him. When the party arrived, Olga told them that she couldn't possibly meet with them when they were all dirty from the road, so they should bathe before coming to her court. They were happy for a nice warm bath, so the envoys went to the bathhouse and Olga ordered her people to prepare a special bath for them. In the business, this is what we call foreshadowing, people. Once the Drevlians were inside, Olga had the doors locked and the building set on fire from the doors, so there was absolutely no way to escape. So with Olga basically taking out the entirety of Drevlian leadership, the score is now Olga 2, Mal 0. Not that he's aware of it yet. After disposing of the escort, Olga sent another messenger to Mal, saying she can't marry him until she has properly buried and mourned for Igor. So the Drevlians were to prepare great quantities of mead in the city where you killed my husband, that I may weep over his grave and hold a funeral feast for him. When Olga and her small entourage arrived, they held a funeral feast, and they asked the Drevlians to join them. The Drevlians treated this feast like a frat party and got absolutely wasted. So when the Drevlians were good and drunk, Olga ordered her followers to kill them a la Red Wedding, and went about herself egging on her retinue to the massacre of the Drevlians. According to the primary chronicle, 5,000 Drevlians were killed in just this one night. And for those of you keeping score, it is now Olga 3, Mal 0. After the funeral feast, Olga returned to Kiev to pick up her army. Yes, they killed 5,000 Drevlians without most of the army. Her army then marched through the Drevlian lands, with every city they encountered surrendering and agreeing to pay tribute to Olga, because they knew what's best for them. Then they arrived at Iskorsden, the Drevlian capital, to finish off the survivors in the city where Igor was murdered. Iskorstan had walls, so the Rus decided to just lay siege to the city. After about a year without successfully taking the city, Olga came up with a plan. She sent in a message that said, "Why do you persist in holding out? All your cities have surrendered to me and submitted to tribute, so that the inhabitants now cultivate their lands and fields in peace. But you had rather die of hunger without submitting to tribute." The Drevlians responded to this that they would happily surrender and submit tribute to her, but they were afraid that she would still take revenge on them for, the whole murdering the husband thing. Olga responded that murdering the messengers and the 5,000 people at the feast was enough for her. So she then told them that all she asked for in tribute is, "Give me 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each house." And the Drevlians were more than happy with this price. The next night, Olga instructed her army to tie a small cloth and a piece of sulfur to the leg of each of the birds. Then they light the piece of sulfur and release the birds, who returned to their nests in the thatch of the buildings and set the entire city ablaze. The primary chronicle says, "There was not a house that was not consumed, and it was impossible to extinguish the flames because all the houses were alight at once. As the citizens of Iskorstan fled, the Rus army captured them, killing some, giving some as slaves to their followers, and letting a few go so that they could live on the land and pay the Rus tribute in the future." Olga ruled as regent for her son and was known for establishing trading posts, hunting grounds, boundary posts, and new towns throughout her empire. Now, I know what you're all thinking. Didn't I say Olga was a saint? And none of this sounds particularly saintly, does it? Well, you're right, and at the time, most of the Rus were pagans, Olga included. She was tolerant of the new Christian religion, but she was still a pagan. In the 950s, Olga traveled to Constantinople to meet the Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII to improve trade relations between their kingdoms. I'm going to be quoting directly from the primary chronicle on this. I will leave a lot of references down below if you guys want to read it for yourself. Olga came before him, and when he saw that she was very fair of countenance and wise as well, the emperor wondered at her intellect. He conversed with her and remarked that she was worthy to reign with him in his city. When Olga overheard his words, she replied that she was still a pagan, and if he desired to baptize her, he should perform this function himself. Otherwise, she was unwilling to accept baptism. The emperor called in the patriarch, and she was baptized, with Constantine as her godfather, taking the name Helena after Emperor Constantine I's mother, Saint Helena, or possibly from the current Constantine's wife. For those who aren't familiar with the Orthodox religion, the patriarch is the leader of the church, similar to the Pope in Western Catholicism. And the patriarch taught Olga about the religion and said she bowed her head, and like a sponge absorbing water, she eagerly drank in his teachings. After Olga's baptism, Constantine made it clear why he wanted her to be baptized in the first place. As if saying she was fair of countenance and wise as well, and worthy to reign with him in his city wasn't clear enough. Also, he probably liked the prospect of gaining power over the Rus, but that's not very romantic. He also already had a wife, so I don't know what his plans were with that. Olga, being as smart as she was, had already seen this coming. So she replied, "How can you marry me after yourself baptizing me and calling me your daughter? For among Christians that is unlawful, and as you yourself must know." So the emperor replied, "Olga, you have outwitted me." He gave her many gifts of gold, silver, silks, various vases, and dismissed her, still calling her his daughter. Olga continued to rule as regent for her son, even when he came of age, due to his many military campaigns. She also helped to raise his children, who lived with her in Kiev. In 968, the Pechenegs laid siege to Kiev, and Olga managed to fend them off long enough for Sviatoslav to return and defeat them, thus retaining control of his empire. He then told her, "I do not care to remain in Kiev, but should prefer to live in Privoslavets on the Danube, since that is the center of my realm, where all my riches are concentrated: gold, silks, wine, and various fruits from Greece, silver, and my horses from Hungary and Bohemia. And from the Rus, furs, wax, honey, and slaves." Kind of seemed like he was just bragging there, but you know. So Olga made reply, "You behold me in my weakness. Why do you desire to depart from me?" So Sviatoslav stayed with his mother in her final days. And 3 days later, she died on July 11th, 969. Olga requested that they do not hold a funeral feast as she was now a Christian, and Sviatoslav honored her wishes by allowing a Christian burial, even though he was not a Christian. She was buried in Kiev until her tomb was destroyed by the Mongolian Tartar army of Batu Khan in 1240. But still, why was she sainted? Sviatoslav wasn't a Christian. Well, that's because of her that conversion to Christianity became widely accepted in the lands of the Rus. Since she raised her grandson Vladimir, he was also a Christian, and during his reign he officially adopted Christianity as the religion of the Rus in 988. In 1547, the Russian Orthodox Church named her a saint, and in the Eastern Orthodox Church she's given the honorific equal to the apostles, and she's also a saint in the Roman Catholic Church. Her feast day is July 11th, which is the date of her death, and she is the patron of widows and converts. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave it a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Let me know in the comments what topics you want me to cover in the future. I know we're going to go over things like my different jewelry designs, other aspects of history, some hair tutorials, that sort of thing. Don't forget to find me on social media as Rigger Crafts on Facebook, Instagram, and on TikTok now. Links to all my socials are going to be in the description below. And thank you all again for watching. Bye for now.